My family told me I was throwing my life away when I dropped out of college to start a business. 3 years later, I signed a $20 million deal with a top corporation. At the family gathering, I drove up in a sports car. I remember the exact moment my life changed forever. My mom's voice, shaking with disappointment, echoed in my head as she told me, "You're throwing your life away." She didn't understand. No one did? I had dropped out of college to chase a dream they all said would fail, but what they didn't know was that just 3 years later, I'd signed a $20 million deal with a top corporation. And when I showed up at the next family gathering, I wasn't driving a used car anymore. I pulled up in a brand new sports car, and that's when everything flipped. But let me take you back to the beginning, to the day I made the choice that would change my life, and how I almost lost everything: my family, my future, and my faith in myself. I'm Alex Johnson, 26 years old. Right now, I'm standing here in front of you, sharing my story because I know how it feels to be doubted, to feel like no one believes in you. I know what it's like to put everything on the line for something that no one else thinks is possible. But 3 years ago, things weren't like this. Back then, I was just another college student, a kid with big dreams, struggling to figure out who I wanted to be. I was the first person in my family to go to college. My mom and dad, Debbie and John, were proud of me. For them, a degree was the ultimate ticket to success. It was everything they'd worked for, everything they'd hoped for me. Ethan, my younger brother, always looked up to me. He thought I had it all figured out, but the truth was, I didn't. I was suffocating. I hated it. College was draining me. I felt like I was stuck in a system that wasn't built for me. I wanted more. I wanted to create something of my own, to take risks and build something real. The idea of working for someone else, following a prescribed path, was suffocating. But when I told my family, everything changed. "Alex, you're making a huge mistake," my dad said, looking me straight in the eyes. His words were cold, disappointed. "You've worked too hard to throw it all away." "And my mom," she cried. She didn't even try to hide it. I'll never forget the way her tears hit the table as she begged me to reconsider. "You have a future here, Alex. You're so close to graduating. Don't throw it away for some pipe dream." It hurt more than I can put into words. These weren't just words from family. They were my life's foundation. My entire existence up until then had been built on the idea that I would follow this path, get my degree, and get a job. My mom's and dad's voices in my head telling me I was on the right track were the only things keeping me grounded. But in that moment, I realized that I couldn't live my life for them. Not anymore. I had to do what felt right for me. Still, I questioned myself. Was I being reckless? Was I throwing away a safe, comfortable future for something that might never even work? But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something more. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I dropped out of college. The look in my dad's eyes when I told him was like a punch to the gut. "You're throwing your life away, Alex. You'll regret this." I remember the sting of those words like it was yesterday. I walked away from everything that was familiar and dove headfirst into the unknown, and it was terrifying. The first few months after I dropped out felt like I was living in a constant state of fear and doubt. Every day was a battle. I had no safety net, no backup plan, just me, my idea, and a stack of rejection emails. Every time I reached out to investors, I felt like I was hitting a brick wall. Everyone kept saying the same thing: "It's too risky. We don't think you're ready." Or worse, "Come back to us when you have more experience." But what they didn't understand was that I was all in. I couldn't go back to that life. I couldn't let go of the dream. I moved into a tiny apartment that was barely big enough for a desk and a bed. My walls were bare. No fancy decor, no comfort. Just a cramped space where I spent 18-hour days coding, designing, pitching, failing, and then starting all over again. But it wasn't just the work that made it tough, it was the loneliness. The constant voice in my head questioning if I'd made the right choice. the doubt, the overwhelming feeling that maybe I wasn't cut out for this after all. I remember one night sitting in front of my laptop, staring at a screen full of rejection letters. The weight of the world was on my shoulders. I hadn't paid rent in 2 months. I had no money left for food. My bank account was empty. The only thing I had left was my belief in the idea. I closed my eyes and thought about my family. I could already feel the distance growing between us. Every time I called home, I heard the same thing. "Have you found a real job yet?" my mom asked in that soft, disappointed voice. My dad would try to be more encouraging, but the subtle judgment was always there, lingering beneath his words. "Don't worry, Alex, it's just a phase. You'll come around." But every time I heard those words, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I knew I couldn't go back. If I didn't make this work, I'd have nothing. No degree, no job, no family support. It would all be over. I started questioning myself more and more. Was I really doing the right thing? Was I fooling myself into thinking I had what it took to succeed? Then came the worst part, the moment I almost lost everything, my last shot at making this work. I had managed to land one final meeting with an investor. This was the big one, the opportunity that could change everything. I stayed up for days preparing my pitch. I was confident. This was it. But when the meeting happened, everything went wrong. The investor wasn't impressed. He didn't believe in my vision. He dismissed me without even giving me a chance to explain. He was polite, but I could tell he didn't think I was worth his time. I walked out of that meeting feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I was crushed. For days I couldn't get out of bed. I was paralyzed by the thought that I had wasted everything, my money, my time, my dreams. And the worst part? I knew I had no one to turn to. I couldn't go back to my family. They'd never understand. They would never believe in me again. I was alone. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I didn't know if I could keep going. The weight of my failure was too much to carry. But deep down, I knew there was no turning back. If I stopped now, I would never forgive myself. So I made a choice. I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let fear or rejection define me. I was going to keep pushing, no matter what it took. It was make or break time. It's funny how moments of clarity can strike when you least expect them. For me, it came on a night when I thought I had reached rock bottom. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my laptop, completely numb. The glow of the screen reflected the exhaustion on my face. I had been up for over 24 hours, trying to figure out how to fix everything that was falling apart around me. I had no money left, no backup plans, no connections, and every rejection email I had received in the past few weeks just seemed to scream the same thing: "You're not good enough." I had always been told that success comes when you're prepared, when you have the right resources, the right people behind you, and the right strategy. But I didn't have any of that. I didn't have the degree, the investors, or even a mentor to guide me through the process. It felt like I was building this business on my own, one small step at a time, without knowing if any of it would even matter. But in that moment of despair, when I felt like I had nothing left to give, something inside me snapped. I was tired of being scared. I was tired of doubting myself. I realized that if I didn't take control now, if I didn't fully commit to this crazy idea, it would never happen. All my hard work, all the sleepless nights, the sacrifice, I would lose it all. I took a deep breath and closed my laptop. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to make something work, and it had to be now. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through old contacts, searching for anyone who could help. I sent out email after email, message after message, each one more desperate than the last. No fancy pitch, no perfect words, just raw, desperate pleas for help. Then I had an idea. What if I could turn this rejection into an opportunity? Instead of waiting for investors or bigger companies to see my potential, why not find a way to make them see that I was capable of success, even if I didn't have their approval? I didn't need to wait for them. I could create my own opportunities. I decided I would create a prototype of my product, something small, something tangible that I could hold up and show the world. I knew it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. It would prove that I wasn't just some dreamer. I was a doer. With barely enough money to cover the costs, I rented a small co-working space and started to build. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, it was messy. Tools scattered everywhere, pieces of paper filled with sketches and scribbles. There were nights I didn't sleep at all, fueled only by the idea that this was the turning point. I couldn't afford failure anymore. I could no longer wait for others to believe in me. I had to show them. I spent the next few weeks refining the product. Every minute I wasn't working, I felt guilty. I barely saw my family. They had started to give me pitying looks when I'd call, as if they were preparing for me to come crawling back home. And with each passing day, I feared they were right. I had nothing to show for this decision. But then, it happened. One afternoon, an email came in. It was from a top-tier tech company, a company I had idolized since I first started this journey. I had sent a pitch to them months ago, right before I had hit rock bottom. I almost didn't send it, but there it was, in my inbox. "We've seen your work, and we're interested." I read that email over and over, not believing what I was seeing. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. I replied immediately, setting up a meeting for the following week. I put together the best presentation of my life, but this time it wasn't just a pitch. It was my heart on a plate. I poured everything I had into it, not holding back, showing them that this wasn't just some business. This was my future. This was everything I had worked for. But even as I prepared for that meeting, doubt crept in. Would they see what I saw? Would they believe in me the way I had believed in myself, even when it seemed impossible? That night, as I went over my notes for the 1,000th time, I realized something crucial. If they didn't believe in me, it didn't matter. I would still move forward. I would still keep building. But if they did, if this worked, I was going to change everything. I was going to prove everyone wrong. The night before the meeting, I didn't sleep. My heart raced in my chest as I rehearsed every word I was going to say. The fear, the excitement, the anxiety, it all mixed together in this chaotic cocktail of emotions. I was scared, yes. But deep down, I knew that this moment, this meeting, could change everything. The day of the meeting came, and I remember standing outside the building, feeling both calm and completely overwhelmed at the same time. I had prepared for this moment for months, maybe even years, but now that I was actually here, it felt surreal. I kept telling myself, "This is it. This is your chance." I had never been in a boardroom like this before, sleek, polished, with walls of glass and sharp angles that made me feel smaller than I already did. The team at the tech company was everything I had hoped they'd be: sharp, intimidating, successful. They had built empires from nothing, and here I was, a 26-year-old with no degree, a small prototype, and nothing but passion to offer. They sat across from me, their expressions unreadable, as I went through my pitch. I tried to remain composed, speaking with conviction, but I could feel my hands shaking. I could hear the voice in my head telling me to just stop, to quit, to admit I didn't belong here. But then I remembered the sacrifices, the long nights, the isolation, the doubt that had gnawed at me for so long. I couldn't stop now. I finished my pitch, and there was a moment of silence, the kind of silence that felt like it lasted forever. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for a response, unsure of what I was about to hear. And then one of them spoke up, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper voice. "This is impressive," she said, leaning back in her chair, "but we need to know what makes you different. Why should we take a chance on you?" I didn't have a perfect answer. I wasn't going to sit there and pretend that I was the best candidate. They were right to ask. I had nothing that really set me apart except for my drive and my willingness to take risks. "I don't have the credentials or the connections you might expect," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But what I do have is the ability to keep going when everything else falls apart. I've put everything into this. I've sacrificed my safety net, my comfort, my family's approval. But I know that if I don't take this chance now, I'll never forgive myself." There was another pause and my stomach twisted into a knot. I watched them exchange looks, silent discussions that I could only guess at. Then the woman who had spoken earlier looked directly at me, her expression unreadable. "We're going to give you a chance, Alex, but this deal is only the beginning. You'll need to prove yourself every step of the way." I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning. It took a second for the words to register. They were offering me a deal. A $20 million deal? I nodded, but I'm pretty sure I was in shock. I wasn't sure if I was even still breathing as we went over the specifics. My mind couldn't process it. My dream, the one I had been chasing alone in the dark for so long, was becoming a reality. That night, when I left the office, I had to step outside just to get some fresh air. I stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the sky, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Everything I had worked for was right there in front of me. It was real. And the next day, the final moment, the one that would change everything, came. I remember driving back to my parents' house. My hands were still trembling, but it was a different kind of tremble now. I wasn't scared of failure anymore. I wasn't nervous about what might happen. I was ready. As I turned into the driveway, I saw my family gathered outside. They were having one of their usual Sunday get-togethers, and I could hear their laughter from the street. They had no idea what I had just accomplished. They had no idea how much had changed. I parked the car at the end of the driveway, the engine purring. I took a deep breath and walked up the path, feeling the weight of every step. When I walked into the yard, everything fell silent. I knew they were all staring at me, but I didn't look at them. Instead, I let the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke. "I made it," I said quietly, looking down at my shoes, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I signed a deal, $20 million. Then I lifted my head and met their eyes. They looked at me as if they couldn't quite process what I was saying. My mom's mouth dropped open, her hand frozen in midair, holding a plate of food. My dad looked like he had been hit by a truck. And then, without saying a word, I turned and walked back toward the driveway. I could hear them scrambling behind me, trying to catch up, but I didn't stop. I reached the car, unlocked the door, and climbed in. I started the engine, the hum of the sports car filling the air. I could feel their eyes on me, the weight of their disbelief and shock heavy in the air. But it didn't matter. I was no longer that kid they had doubted. I was no longer the one they thought was making a mistake. And when I drove off, the sound of the engine roaring in the distance, I knew I had finally proven to myself and to them that dreams are worth chasing, no matter how impossible they seem. It was no longer about the money. It was about the journey, about taking that first step, even when no one else believed you could. The next few weeks after I signed that deal felt like a blur. I was living a dream I had almost convinced myself would never come true. But the real work had only just begun. People from all over reached out to congratulate me, old friends, business acquaintances, even former classmates who I hadn't spoken to in years. Some offered support, others just wanted to be associated with my success. It was overwhelming, to say the least. But what struck me most was how different things were with my family. My parents, who once doubted every decision I made, were now proud of me. They no longer saw me as the reckless son who had thrown his future away. Instead, they saw the man who had worked tirelessly, sacrificed everything, and proved them wrong. But as grateful as I was for their support, something inside me shifted. I had learned that no matter how much they loved me, I couldn't live my life on their terms. And now, with this success, I realized that this wasn't just a victory for me. It was a lesson in resilience, in believing in yourself even when the world tells you to stop. The first time I saw my dad after everything had settled, I was visiting them at home. My mom and dad were sitting at the kitchen table, smiling at me as I walked in. "I can't believe it," my dad said, shaking his head. "You proved us all wrong. I never thought you'd pull it off." It wasn't just the words that mattered. It was the way he said it. There was no judgment, no disappointment, just pride. It took me a long time to fully understand what that meant. But as I sat there with them, I realized something crucial. Success isn't just about reaching the end goal. It's about the journey, the grit, the persistence, and the sacrifices along the way. I had spent so many years chasing a dream that no one understood, and I spent so much time wondering if I was doing the right thing. But what I learned was that success doesn't look the same for everyone. It's not about following a prescribed path. It's about figuring out what you want and being willing to fight for it, even when no one else believes in you. Looking back, I can't say I have any regrets. Sure, I could have taken an easier route, followed the conventional path, and gone back to school. But then I would never have known what I was truly capable of. I would have never learned that the only limits I had were the ones I placed on myself. And that's the real lesson I want to leave with you. If you're out there doubting yourself, questioning your choices, wondering if you're on the right path, just know that it's okay to take risks. It's okay to go after something that no one else believes in. Because the truth is, you'll never know what you're capable of until you take that leap, even when it seems like the whole world is telling you to stay grounded. I proved to myself and to my family that following your dreams isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's a risk worth taking. And when you keep pushing, when you keep believing, there's no limit to what you can achieve. So, take that first step. Believe in yourself even when it seems impossible. And one day, you'll look back at everything you've done and realize that all the sacrifices, all the doubts, were worth it. Because in the end, it's not about the money or the success you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. And that's the victory.